Have you ever stopped to think that maybe the problem isn't what you feel, but what you do with what you feel? Anxiety, guilt, anger, everyone goes through it. But some people sink and others float. The difference isn't in the emotion, but in the mental structure of the person dealing with it. And here's a truth few have the courage to say: it's not therapy or medication or motivation that will solve this if you don't understand how your mind operates. And that's where Stoicism comes in, not as some distant philosophy, but as a practical map to get out of this mental maze. Most people believe they need to eliminate negative thoughts to live in peace. But what if I told you the path isn't to fight them, but to invite them for coffee and ask what they came to teach? Sounds crazy, I know, but it's exactly this counterintuitive mindset that transforms. And the best part, you can apply this now, today. You don't need to become a monk or read 1,000 books. Just understand a few simple but deep principles that will flip the switch in your mind. This video isn't just another pretty talk about positive thinking. We're going to talk about practical techniques involving neuroplasticity, self-mastery, mindfulness, expressive writing, and even the way you sit in your chair. Here you'll learn how to turn your physical posture into an emotional tool, how to be grateful even for your worst thoughts, and how to use your mind as an ally, not an enemy. And if you think this is just talk for Zen people, hold on, because you'll be surprised at the power of applying this in real life. Now, if you've made it this far, it's because some part of you is tired of being pulled around by thoughts that don't always make sense. And maybe, just maybe, what you're looking for isn't more strength, it's more clarity. See, come with me, because what you're about to discover here might be exactly what you needed to finally break free from this cycle of anxiety, guilt, and anger. The first lesson a wise person shares with anyone who wants to master their own mind is this: stop fighting negative thoughts as if they were monsters. They're not. In fact, the more you fight them, the stronger they seem to become. That's because when you resist, your mind interprets it as a threat and switches into alert mode. Have you noticed how trying not to think about something just makes that thing even more present? The real key lies in acceptance, that calm posture of someone who looks inward and says, "Okay, you showed up, feel free to stay, but you're not in charge." It's funny how we're taught from an early age that we need to get rid of what bothers us. But Stoicism, with all its ancient wisdom, teaches the opposite, that negative thoughts should be observed, not fought. It's like opening the door to an annoying guest but not letting them walk in with dirty shoes. You see them, acknowledge them, and continue doing what needs to be done. This mindset, a mix of acceptance and mindfulness, drains the thought's power without needing to confront it directly. And that's where true self-mastery begins. A practical example: next time you're hit with a mental flood saying you're not good enough or everything's going to go wrong, take a deep breath, adjust your posture, and say internally, "This is just a thought, not a fact." The language you use in your mind matters a lot. Naming those thoughts also helps. It might sound silly, but calling that critical voice Mr. Catastrophic or Ms. Defeat takes the weight off and brings lightness. Your interpretation of events changes once you realize that thoughts aren't sentences, they're just passing ideas. And this mindset makes space for something even more powerful: observation without judgment. And here's the real game changer. It's not about pretending you don't feel or fooling yourself. It's about accepting discomfort without getting lost in it. When you stop resisting, you start to see clearly. It's like wiping a foggy window clean. And that calmer, clearer perspective will set the stage for using your body in favor of your mind. The body speaks before the mind understands, and often it shouts truths that the head keeps trying to ignore. The secret? Learning to use the body as an ally in the emotional balance process. Deep breathing is one of the simplest and most powerful tools for this. 3 slow breaths through the nose, filling the belly and exhaling slowly, are enough to signal the brain, it's okay. Stoicism has always valued this physical self-awareness. After all, emotional control begins the moment you take control of your own physiology. Posture matters a lot. Drooped shoulders, eyes on the ground, a slouched spine. All of this reinforces a sense of threat or defeat to the brain. Have you ever noticed how hard it is to feel confident when your body is curled up? On the other hand, standing tall, chest open, and breathing consciously sends a clear message to the nervous system. I'm in control. Neuroscience studies show this even alters hormone levels, boosting testosterone, linked to confidence, and reducing cortisol, the stress hormone. It's not magic, it's applied neuroplasticity. Simple exercises can cause a silent revolution in the mind. A good example: in the morning, before facing the day, practice the so-called power pose for 2 minutes. Standing tall, arms raised, deep breathing. Know what happens? The brain responds as if you've just won something big. It's like you're training your mind through your body. Another useful exercise: walk while looking toward the horizon, not the ground. It might seem like a small detail, but it changes everything. This creates a positive mental environment even before your first conscious thought appears. When the mind is trained this way, it starts to trust the body as an anchor. That's when you realize that self-compassion can also be physical. It's not just about kind words, but about giving your body the care and posture it deserves. Then everything connects. Mindfulness, self-mastery, deep breathing, and even the way you interpret the small events of the day. And when that happens, a new skill begins to emerge, recognizing the thought patterns that keep showing up. The mind has a curious habit. It loves to repeat. What we think today is very likely the same thing we thought yesterday. And that's where the danger of negative thought patterns comes in. They become well-worn paths in the brain. Generalizations like "nothing ever works out for me," or catastrophizing thoughts like "everything's going to fall apart," are classic examples. Stoicism teaches us to look at these thoughts the way a detective would: investigative, curious, calm. It's not about fighting them, but about labeling them for what they really are: cognitive distortions, not absolute truths. A good practical exercise is to keep a small notebook, physical or on your phone, where you write down recurring thoughts that cross your mind. Then question each one with simple prompts. Is this always true? Is there an exception? Is this a fact or just my interpretation? This expressive writing isn't just for venting. It's for bringing clarity to what once felt like a confusing storm. And here's a little twist of humor. Give your thought patterns funny names. Drama Queen Maria or Doomsday Joe help break the serious tone those thoughts try to carry. This process activates neuroplasticity. Every time you recognize a pattern and choose to respond differently, you're wiring new connections in your brain. It's like building mental shortcuts that pull you out of the mud of autopilot and place you on solid ground. That positive mental environment starts here, step by step, with non-judgmental observation and conscious choices. Over time, you start spotting negative thoughts from afar, like a pushy salesman trying to sell you something you already know you don't need. And it's exactly this awareness that creates space for a new kind of internal freedom, the ability to use your mind as an ally, not an enemy. When you learn to identify patterns and respond with reason, emotional control stops being a theory and becomes daily practice. And in that practice, a habit emerges, one that many underestimate, but that holds immense transformative power: writing. But not just any writing. Writing to break free, to organize the chaos, and to turn what was once a mental knot into clarity. There are things we only truly understand when we write them down. The mind might try to organize thoughts, but when everything stays inside, it turns into a mess. Expressive writing is a powerful way to externalize inner chaos and see more clearly what once seemed like a monster with 7 heads. Stoicism has long supported this kind of practice. Seneca wrote letters not to send, but to understand himself. And let's be honest, writing is like having a conversation with someone who really gets you, except that someone is you. Start like this. When you're feeling overwhelmed, grab a pen and paper or your phone's notes app and write down everything that comes to mind. No filter. It doesn't have to be pretty or make sense. Just write. Write like you're venting to your best friend. Then read it out loud. This helps put emotions into perspective and, as a bonus, lowers their emotional impact. Want to go further? Try giving silly names to the thoughts that pop up. Calling fear Casper or guilt drama queen might seem childish, but it works. This kind of writing activates a deep process of self-compassion. You start to truly listen to yourself without judgment, and that's freeing. Plus, writing also helps you interpret events more rationally. Often, it's only when you see it on paper that you realize the problem wasn't that big. It was just the way you were interpreting it. And when that awareness kicks in, even your posture shifts. Your breathing gets lighter, your chest opens up. Everything starts to align, mind, body, and page. And the best part, over time, writing becomes a habit, a mental cleansing ritual. Instead of letting negative thoughts pile up like emotional junk, you recycle them into words. This practice creates a positive mental environment where the mind finds space to breathe, reorganize, and move forward. And when that clarity sets in, a new relationship with your own thoughts begins to form. You start to thank them. Yes, even the bad ones. Because even they have something to teach. It feels strange at first, but it works. Thanking your negative thoughts. Not because you like them, but because they reveal where something still needs to be understood. The philosophy of Stoicism invites us to take this broader perspective, where even pain has a purpose. When you read a negative thought out loud and say, "Thank you," something shifts inside. The automatic reaction of rejection is replaced by acceptance, and that drastically reduces the emotional grip of that idea. It's like looking at a dark cloud and realizing it's not the whole sky. This exercise transforms how the mind relates to its own narrative. Instead of seeing yourself as a victim of your thoughts, you become the observer. And the observer has power. They understand that thoughts come and go, and you don't have to ride every single one. By giving thanks, you create space. Space to interpret events more clearly. Space to breathe deeply and remember there's a higher self within. A self that chooses, that directs, that builds a positive mental environment. To apply this in practice, try the following. When you notice a negative thought arising, pause for a moment. Say out loud, "Thank you for showing me where it still hurts." You don't need to believe the thought or like it. Just thank it and move on. That simple gesture activates a new neural circuit, promoting neuroplasticity and supporting emotional regulation. It's like teaching your brain a new way to deal with old problems. Little by little, self-mastery stops being a concept and becomes a lived experience. This attitude of gratitude becomes fertile ground for self-compassion. When you realize that thoughts aren't enemies but signals, everything changes. Resentment gives way to curiosity. And from that curiosity comes an opportunity to reprogram old mental patterns, to use mindfulness not just to observe, but to transform. And once that transformation begins, the brain starts to learn a new path. And that path inevitably leads to a new kind of training, shaping the brain with intention. The brain isn't made of concrete, it's clay. And this moldable clay is constantly changing, depending on the stimuli it receives. That's what neuroplasticity reveals. Repeated thoughts carve neural pathways like trails in a forest. If you always walk the same path, of guilt, fear, or anger, it becomes automatic. But the good news is that it's possible to create new routes. Stoicism spoke of this in its own way when it emphasized training the mind. Today, science confirms it. Repeating constructive thoughts strengthens positive connections and quiets the brain regions linked to fear. Start small. Instead of trying to eliminate all negative thoughts at once, choose one new thought to repeat daily. Something simple but powerful, like, I have the power to choose how I react. Or, my thoughts do not define me. Write it down, read it aloud, repeat it throughout the day. Over time, this repetition becomes inner strength. That's how you rewire the brain. It's not magic, it's practice, it's mindfulness, and it's a conscious choice to cultivate a positive mental environment, even in the midst of chaos. This kind of mental training can be done during simple moments in your day, while showering, driving, or walking to the store. The mind loves to fill empty space with random thoughts. So why not use those moments to plant better seeds? Neuroplasticity works like weight training. The more you practice, the stronger your mind becomes. And the best part, this consistent practice of reconfiguring your mind also activates self-mastery, giving you the power to choose where before there was only automatic reaction. And as this new pattern starts to take root, something interesting happens. The mind begins to seek out on its own the stimuli that support this new path. More inspiring books, more positive people, more intentional actions. At this point, the brain no longer wants to go back to the old shortcuts of suffering. And to maintain this new rhythm, there's one essential step: avoiding mental idleness, that kind of pause that seems like rest, but becomes fertile ground for a spiral of negative thoughts. An idle mind isn't a resting mind. It's a mind that devours itself. When you don't direct your thoughts, they take on a life of their own. And usually they head straight for the darkest places: worry, guilt, anxiety. It's like leaving a car running without a driver. Guess where it ends up? Crashing into the first emotional wall. Stoicism warned us about this long ago. An empty mind is fertile ground for the most destructive impulses. That's why consciously engaging your mind isn't just about productivity, it's self-care. You don't have to become a machine that's always doing, but rather someone who chooses wisely what to think about. Learning something new, for example, is a powerful way to redirect your attention. It could be a new language, a new recipe, or even understanding how deep breathing affects your nervous system. Want a practical tip? Try reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's short, but every page hits like an elegant punch of wisdom. This kind of reading not only feeds the intellect, it also strengthens a positive mental environment with consistent reflections. Another powerful tool is solving small everyday problems with presence and mindfulness. Organizing that drawer you've been avoiding for months, assembling a piece of furniture, even washing the dishes with focus can be mental training. It may sound silly, but focusing on simple actions trains the brain to stay in the now, reducing the power of negative thoughts. When you give your mind a rhythm to follow, there's less room for it to drift into distortions. And the most interesting part, all of this brings you closer to one of the most neglected practices, self-forgiveness. Because the more focused you are on growth, the less time you have to punish yourself for past mistakes. And then, in that new flow, a different kind of space opens up. An inner silence that doesn't suffocate but embraces. A space where self-compassion begins to bloom slowly, and where mistakes stop being sentences and start becoming lessons. And it's precisely in this lighter ground that forgiveness finds a real place in your life. Forgiving yourself isn't about making excuses. It's about understanding that mistakes are part of the journey, and beating yourself up over them only slows you down. Stoicism teaches that what matters isn't what happened, but what you do with what happened. A mistake doesn't define you. Your reaction to it does. When the mind is stuck in guilt, it becomes blind to solutions. But when self-compassion enters the scene, everything shifts. Guilt becomes learning. And the most interesting part? The brain starts to reprogram that response. That's neuroplasticity in action. No emotional whipping required. Here's a simple and effective exercise. Write a letter to yourself as if you were writing to someone you deeply love. Use words you'd never dare to use for yourself, but wouldn't hesitate to say to a friend who's hurting. Then read that letter out loud. The first time might feel awkward, but the second begins to heal. Because when the brain hears your own voice offering kindness, it starts to understand, I'm not at war with myself. This reinforces a positive mental environment, and emotional regulation starts to settle in naturally. Mistakes are part of the growth process. No one evolves through perfection. Growth comes from effort, from stumbling, from course correcting. When you forgive yourself, you allow mindfulness to return. You let your mind breathe again. Self-mastery emerges in that space, not as force, but as choice. And here's the beautiful part. When you forgive yourself, you begin to see others with more kindness too. It's as if something inside you says, if I can give myself another chance, why not offer one to the world as well? And in that lighter space, you begin to realize how everything is connected. The way you treat yourself, the thoughts you feed, the habits you build, the environment you live in. And speaking of environment, maybe it's time to take a closer, more loving look at the place your mind calls home. Because there's no use rebuilding yourself on the inside if what's around you keeps sabotaging the process. The mind is like a plant. What grows inside it depends on the soil it's planted in. If the environment around you is toxic, full of negative stimuli, criticism, and pressure, even the healthiest thoughts begin to wither. Stoicism teaches us that we can't control everything around us, but we can choose where we place ourselves and who we place ourselves with. A positive mental environment begins with small decisions. What kind of content are you consuming? Who are the people you talk to the most? What enters your mind every single day will shape what comes out of it too. Want a practical example? Clean up your social media, seriously. Follow accounts that lift you up, mute the ones that trigger comparison and anxiety. This also applies to what you watch, listen to, and read. Swap out sensationalist news for a personal development podcast. Replace 3 random videos with one that talks about self-mastery, neuroplasticity, or expressive writing. Your digital environment matters a lot, because today, it's nearly as present as your physical one, and it can either be your ally or your peace thief. The same goes for people. You don't have to cut ties, but you can limit your exposure to those who constantly pour out negativity. Surrounding yourself with people who inspire you, who challenge you to grow, who believe in your evolution. That's an emotional investment. It strengthens emotional control, encourages constructive thinking, and helps you stay mindful. Creating this field of good energy around you even makes deep breathing easier, because the body feels when it's in a safe place, and mental safety is fertilizer for the soul. Over time, this environment begins to directly influence how you interpret events. Small things that once threw you off now get handled with more calm. It's like swapping out a foggy lens for a clear one, and once that lens changes, negative thoughts show up less often. And when they do, they don't hit as hard. Which leads to the inevitable question, where do these thoughts even come from? Do they really stem from what happens? Or from how we interpret what happens? Most people don't realize it, but negative thoughts don't come from what happens. They're born from how we interpret what happens. 2 people can go through the exact same situation and react in completely different ways. Why? Because the lens each person uses is unique. Stoicism calls this judgment, and it's exactly this judgment we need to learn to see. When you start to understand that the problem isn't the event itself, but your emotional interpretation of it, something powerful happens. You regain control. A good example is when someone ignores you during a conversation. Your mind might spiral, they hate me, I did something wrong. I'm not important. But what if they were just distracted, or tired, or worried about something that has nothing to do with you? The interpretation shapes the feeling shapes the behavior, and the behavior shapes your entire day. That's why learning to observe your judgments is a direct path to self-mastery. Negative thoughts lose their power when you realize they're just versions. not absolute truths. This is where the practice of non-judgmental observation comes in. When a thought arises, try asking yourself, what I'm feeling right now, is it about the fact or about what I'm thinking about the fact? That question alone changes everything. You start to create space between the stimulus and your reaction. And that space is where the power of choice lives. Mindfulness helps you expand that space, and once it grows, you gain the ability to take a deep breath, adjust your posture, and respond with clarity, not on autopilot. This understanding opens the door to a new mental skill, training your attention like a muscle. Because if the way the mind perceives is what shapes it, then learning to direct your perception is the next natural step. And believe it or not, it's simpler than it seems. It just requires consistency and intention. And that's exactly what the next step is about. How to develop such sharp attention that negative thoughts may pass through it, but they don't stay. Attention is like a muscle. If you don't train it, it weakens. And when your attention is weak, any negative thought can sneak in, spread out, and throw a party. Stoicism already warned us, the soul becomes what it feeds on. And in today's world, where the mind is bombarded with stimuli every second, training your attention isn't a luxury, it's emotional survival. Mindfulness isn't about stopping your thoughts, it's about choosing where to place your focus. And that, my friend, is the beginning of a true mental superpower. Start with the basics. Choose one task a day to do with 100% presence. It could be brushing your teeth, walking, drinking your coffee. No phone, no distractions. Just notice the details. The smell, the sound, the sensation. Sounds simple, it is. And that simplicity is deceiving, because it's in this kind of exercise that you begin to notice what's been running your mind on autopilot. This practice strengthens your ability to notice negative thoughts as they arise without needing to follow them. Over time, you'll notice that you can pause before reacting. That pause is gold. That tiny space between stimulus and response is where emotional control is built. It's where you choose to take a deep breath, hold your posture with intention, and respond with awareness. That small pause is a huge win, and as it repeats, you begin to rewire your patterns. Neuroplasticity kicks in, carving out new mental pathways where there used to be nothing but reactivity and impulse. This constant training transforms your relationship with your own mind. Negative thoughts still show up, of course. You can't switch them off like a light. But now, instead of owning the stage, they become background actors. You become the director of the show. And with a positive mental environment, sharpened attention, and a daily practice of non-judgmental observation, the mental maze starts to reveal exits that were once invisible. And that's where true transformation begins. Now tell me, after all this, are you really going to keep letting your thoughts drag you around like they own your mind? Or are you finally ready to take the wheel of your own story? Because here's the truth. No one's coming in to organize the chaos for you. The good news, you already have all the tools: acceptance, self-mastery, mindfulness, expressive writing. They're all right here, ready for you to use. What's stopping you from starting? Fear of change, shame from past mistakes. What if I told you those feelings are just thoughts too? And as you've seen here, you can face them calmly, welcome them in, learn from them, and move forward. The choice is yours. You can stay stuck in the cycle of anxiety, guilt, and anger, or you can start building, today, a positive mental environment where your mind works for you, not against you. So tell me in the comments, which part hit you the hardest? At what point in the video did it feel like I was speaking directly to you? Let me know. I want to hear from you. I want to know when it finally clicked for you. And of course, if this content made sense to you, if it opened even one small window of clarity inside, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Here you'll keep learning how to master your mind, understand your emotions, and turn inner chaos into strength. Because this, my friend, is just the beginning.